Hey friends, there's something new from our sponsor Text Control. Their new product, DS Server, provides document services out of the box for all platforms and languages. Whether you want to integrate document creation, editing, sharing, or collaboration into your web app, DS Server provides the back-end technology to integrate that professional document processing. For example, using DS Server, you could integrate an MS Word compatible document editor into pure JavaScript, Angular, or an ASP.NET Core application. You can create PDF documents using Web API calls or even request electronic signatures from end users. DS Server is also hosted on-premise in your infrastructure or with your cloud provider, such as Microsoft Azure. And you can test DS Server without downloading anything. Create your first DS Server application in minutes by requesting a trial token on their dedicated website at dsserver.io. That's DSSERVER.io. Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm chatting with Maria Naggaga. She was on my team once, for full disclosure, and now is working on .NET Interactive and is PM for ASP.NET at Microsoft. How are you?
I'm good, Scott. How are you? It's been a while, and why did it take you so long to have me on the show?
I had a long backlog, but you're absolutely right, because I actually did a show a couple of weeks ago where your name came up. So it's good that you're here, because there's we hear a thing, we hear a thought, we hear a quote, and then we end up using it a lot. So one of the quotes that I use a lot when I'm out talking about how I teach was when you called me out about teaching from the metal up, like the silicon, like let's talk about assembly language, versus the glass down. Why do you think it was so important that I was doing that wrong?
Well, the big thing for me is the way I learn is that I need to see what I need to know, like, let me take this back. If you're building a website, I really don't care about how the website reached my browser and what I'm looking at, and I don't care about HTTP and all the different protocols. What I do care about is that when I fill in a form and I hit submit, what happens? Right?
It's empathy. It's customer empathy.
Yeah, it's customer empathy. Like, how does it feel? Like, what code do I write? And I was talking to my now boss, Glenn, about why I liked WinForms so much. Like, WinForms was the very first application I ever built by myself. And the way I got into WinForms was a cousin of mine had a laptop and he had Visual Studio on it. And I just opened up Visual Studio, didn't know I was using Visual Studio, picked a WinForm application, and I started dragging things onto the screen, double clicking on it and saying, oh, on click, right? So I know what happens. On click is an event that does something. And I remember just saying this out to myself. And my cousin was like, how do you know this? And I was like, well, the code makes sense. Like, I want a button to do something. So I'm just going to write some code for it to do something. I didn't even know I was using C# at the time. I didn't even really know I was coding. And I think that's cool. Why it's important.
That's ideal. That's ideal. I didn't even know I was coding. Sounds like the perfect coding experience.
Yeah. And that's what I want in everything I build.
Did you know that I learned in C in university, but my first job was Visual Basic 3. And it was the same experience. This is 25 years ago, dragging a button on click. That kind of does make sense. It hides stuff from you until it doesn't hide stuff from you, which makes me realize that maybe we're not hiding enough up front. You know, people don't like magic, but at the same time, we're probably showing people too much. Sharita and I went and did a class a couple days ago on C#, and it's like using system. Don't worry about that. Namespace, don't worry about that. Public class, don't worry. And we're like, there's like 19 lines there, and you tell them not to worry about 18 of them.
Yeah. You're worried about what's on line 14. And you're like, why did it take me that long to get to line 14? And that has been big. Like, you know this, you've seen the products that I've built over time, like try.net, where I was in this, not battle, but I was in these deep discussions with people that when we're building the try.net experience for docs, I was like, I don't care about the ceremony. I don't care about the namespaces. I don't care about the using statements. All I care about is console.writeLine, and what does that do? And how do I declare a variable, and what happens? I get to know about the other stuff later, right? The body, like I just care about the body of the class versus the entire structure of the class at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was talking to Sharita about this, who was my co-teacher in the C# class that I'll
Yeah.
put on YouTube soon. And she's a TypeScript programmer. And what I thought would be cool is, since she's a TypeScript programmer learning C#, she would come along and we'd learn C# together. And she said when she learned TypeScript and React, there was also a bunch of like, just ignore all of this stuff, this fluff around outside here. But then she said she went back a couple of months later. She's like, oh, that's what that thing is. That's what that was.
That's brilliant because it's eye-opening rather
Mm-hmm.
than forcing a pattern on you when you don't understand what the pattern is.
You know, when my dad taught me how to drive, he said, before you get in the car, we're going to change the tire. And now, while I thought that was cool, now even I tell stories about it, I realize that they're like, I kind of just wanted to sit in the car and turn the wheel a little bit. Like, you made me change the oil before I got to go anywhere, you know? Hey, Dad, I want to drive. Let's talk about the theories of internal combustion. Don't gatekeep my car driving, Dad. I want to go somewhere.
Get to driving. It's like how I had to learn a stick shift, and then all I did was an automatic for the rest of my life. Oh, I don't drive anymore, but
Yeah.
it's like, here's a stick shift. Do your exam. Okay, all we have is automatics for you to drive for the rest of your life.
Oh, so you prepped for the exam on a stick and ended up not needing it.
Never.
That's like prepping for assembly language and then going to Microsoft and then you never use it.
Completely.
But we force people to learn assembly language in school, or we did at least.
No, we do. We still do. And it is not something I completely remember anymore. I was just like, okay, pass the exam. I'm done.
Yeah.
Off.
But how about this, though? Here's some challenging questions, though. There is value in knowing those things. Like, I don't think someone needs to know how an electron works in order to, make toast. But it's kind of nice to know, like, yeah, if you put your finger or a fork in the outlet, you'll get shocked, and power is a thing, electricity is a thing. How many layers underneath the user level should we know? You said you don't care about HTTP until you do.
Yeah. When you hit your first bug, when you hit the first thing that you don't understand, you're going to automatically need to know that layer. And you'll continue to go lower and lower and lower. So let's give an example of, you've heard about minimal APIs, the other rogue project that I'm working on.
That you're known for, by the way, just for context, Maria is known for doing incubation projects. I think she prefers calling them rogue projects. And it's just like, I'm going to go off and work on a thing. And you're always driving towards simplicity. I would think that you're kind of the program manager for simple things, because you want to make things that's too complicated, go one level simpler in order to make it more accessible to new people.
Yes. And that has been a huge passion of mine. And I don't know if it comes from being dyslexic, but I feel like you just need to know when you know. But let's give an example of minimal APIs. So when you're building a web API, right, or an API in .NET today, what is it? A controller folder, startup.cs and program.cs?
Maybe models, startup.cs, yeah.
All that
the
stuff.
Main, you need a public static void main, all that stuff.
All that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. That is great if you're building a large-scale enterprise application. We scale really well with you. What if I just want to build an API that returned a list of podcasts that I liked, like yours, right? Let's say I just want
a list of just one podcast.
One podcast, right? What if I just want to do that? Or a list of items that are in my to-do list? Do I really need that level of structure?
It's the whole Uber theory. Like, I just want to take a Lyft. I don't really care about the car. I don't care about the theory of driving until later I do. But now I just want to go somewhere.
I just want to go somewhere, right? So with minimal APIs, David Fowler and I wanted to challenge the way we built APIs. Why does it have to be all these multiple files? Why couldn't it just be one, right? Mm-hmm. But then when someone grows up beyond that one file, right? Let's say they have a to-do app and then it has auth, and then they can have multiple saved versions of that to-do app. And then you can structure it over the days and build a calendar. Then you begin to see why you need that structure and why you need to understand controllers and views and models. But it's in a way that you grow up to it rather than, hey, what was the analogy like? You understand how the car works.
Right. So the challenge that I've had, because I've been working while you've been doing minimal APIs and things like that, I've been trying to do this, what we're calling simple C# programs, which is kind of born from that idea of all I care about is console.writeline. And you just take every single line and you say, justify why that exists. And now C# has top level programs, but it still has a project file. Like, how do we get rid of the project file? Does that even need to exist? When Sharita and I were doing our C# course a couple of days ago, we had a Python person show up. They were not early in career, though. They were an expert. Mm-hmm. And they started asking questions about lambdas and all that kind of stuff. But where they got caught up was, well, wait a second. I can't just make a folder and start typing. I have to make a project file. And again, that got into ceremony. When you're teaching someone programming, there's going to be little kind of cliffs that you drop them off. Like, the reality is things are going to get hard. I'm hearing you say that they just shouldn't get so hard that they give up.
Yeah.
But you do acknowledge that there will be ups and downs, right? As they
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Like, even the way people build Express apps, like building an Express API is really, really easy. But there's going to be a point when you have to add routes and they have to add all that different structure to it, right? But we shouldn't create an environment where the first thing is like, boom, this is for enterprise. This is for people who've been working on the product for 20 years. And if we do that, right, I worry personally that we're not thinking about the next generation of developers. How do we make sure that people who are in Gen Z are going to be excited about us, or Gen Alpha? Is it Gen Alpha? Anyway, whatever the next.
Is there another one after Z? Are we flipped around to the other side of the thing?
I think it's Alpha. I think it's Gen Alpha. I think like that. I think that's what my nephew and nieces are. I think that's their generation. But also, how do we make sure that for the world that is coming, where everyone's going to build an application, who's not you, who's not me, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're going to have the app developer and we're going to have the software engineers, right? Who are building the tools and the frameworks that are going to make it possible for anybody to build the application.
Interesting. I don't want to go too far off the weeds into the weeds here, but you just made a juxtaposition that I'd never heard before: software engineers and app developers. Like, I made an app, but I'm not a computer scientist, which might even be a layer below that. Like, we don't like to necessarily segment people, but you're basically saying I architected a house versus I'm a professional plumber.
Yeah.
Right. I wrote a compiler versus I made an app and I put it in the app store. You're acknowledging that there are, and again, maybe hierarchies aren't the different, but buckets of people that are interested in different stuff.
Yeah.
Citizen developers making power apps.
Yeah. Citizen developers making power apps. Teachers teaching computer science to their classes. Like, I think we're going to have a world where every student is going to be learning computer science. And we have to prepare the teachers for that. And how are we going to do that if we're doing the metal up, right? Rather than the glass down. And it's our responsibility, like yours and mine, to make sure that we're building languages and features and tools that work for that. Like, you talked about simple programs, right? That's like a big one, right? Top level statements, global usings that just automatically come baked into your application. That's all in effort to make learning the language that we build every single day a lot easier.
Elastic enables the world's leading organizations to put their data to work using the power of search. Whether it's connecting people and teams with content that matters, keeping applications and infrastructure online, or protecting entire digital ecosystems, Elastic's search platform is able to surface relevant results with speed and at scale. Learn how you can get started with Elastic's search platform for free at elastic.co/Hansel-minutes. That's elastic.co/Hansel-minutes. What would you say to people on the internet, not our wonderful friends listening to this podcast, but theoretical people out there who say, well, yeah, computers should be hard. They are hard. Suck it up. I mean, it's hard. Figure it out.
People say the same thing about math. And we're learning Pythagoras theory, when you're around 8? 10?
Yeah, actually, well, he's now, what is he now? Shoot, how old are my kids? He's 7th grade, right? He's doing geometry and Pythagoras, I can't say it right.
Pythagoras theory, yeah.
We're going to get hate in the comments about, like, they can't pronounce that. But like the a squared, c squared, b squared, all that kind of stuff. And he's a little kid, and he's already applying it to stuff. Really, there shouldn't be an age range on when you introduce these kind of things. I've seen 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds start playing with Lego, program them to be doing little robots, things like that. I don't personally see any reason why we need to gatekeep reading. Like, it would be like, you're too young to learn reading. You should wait till you're 10 to learn to read. You read whenever you're ready. Yeah. Right? Write software when you're ever ready. But anything we can do to make it easier is a good thing.
Yeah. And like, yeah, I know there are going to be people, and I've had these conversations of like, well, software should be hard. And I'm trying to get better of not like wanting to hang up the phone and walk away from the conversation. But I think we have to tell people that, as we said, there are various levels of software engineering or app development. And
Mm.
what are we going to do to make sure that teaching is important? And I think things like .NET notebooks, right? And the whole Jupyter notebooks ecosystem has really done that for Python. They've made
Mhm.
learning Python so easy that it's become like the IDE of choice. Even if you go to your first CS 101 class and you're learning Python, they're like,
Mhm.
here is Jupyter because we know it will just work.
Mhm. So Sharita and I, literally yesterday, by the time this podcast goes live, a couple weeks ago, used the .NET Education Pack, which I've blogged about, and people can check out at .NET/learn to code. So you just go and search for it. It's basically Visual Studio Code plus all the stuff you need for .NET and C# and F#, and then .NET Notebooks, which you have mentioned, powered by this engine called .NET Interactive. And from the point of view of the user, you just go download the thing, click, 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 and it drops you into what looks like a Word document, but then there's code. And that's called Notebooks. That was made popular by Jupyter, this
Yeah.
concept of notebooks.
And the concept of notebook is like, as you said, it's a living document, right? So, and I think that the term they use is live document. So the mixture of code and markdown, you're able to run and edit the cells. It's become a great way to learn. I think even our organization is making huge investments in saying that this is going to be the default experience to teach people new concepts using notebooks. And like for the education pack, like the reason why you built it, because you built it. I don't know if people know that when they're listening, but you were
with a large team of
with
people.
a large team of people. But you've been very passionate about the ability for people when they're learning C# to just open a notebook, have the explanation, and look at the code. And I think you've also noticed that the ability to do that rather than saying, hey, console means this. You've read our docs, right? Where they talk about console means this and write line means this. And these are methods and these are the APIs that support it. And you're just like, I don't need to know this. All I need to know is that, okay, what can I use console.writeline for? And how would it inspire me to build my next application? What can we do to inspire people to build on .NET and to build in C#?
Yeah, Microsoft documentation has largely been API focused since the early days of the MSDN, the Microsoft Developer Network, was mostly like a bunch of help files that came on a CD that gave you a list of things that objects had, a bunch of methods. And it was like, here are the million methods. Here's the Win32 API. Here's 32,000 whatever methods. But it wasn't really user focused. It wasn't like solution focused. Here's a thing I want to do and the supporting API. So it's kind of inverted, which is what you were implying. My thinking was inverted. Instead of coming from top down, I was coming bottom up. Here's the silicon, here's processors, and here's a million APIs. Enjoy.
Yep.
That's a little overwhelming. Like, here's all the paints. Go make the Mona Lisa. Well, let's talk about art theory. And we skipped all of that.
Yeah, like if you look, I don't know if you've looked at Fast API or even React or Django. And when you go into their websites, the first thing it says is like, Fast, a great way to build simple APIs. And you're just like, simple. I like it.
Yeah.
Right?
Those are the keywords.
And those are the keywords. And then when you dive farther and farther into the framework and you grow with the documents, you get more and more metal deep. I don't know if you go as far as the assemblies, but you begin to gain an appreciation for every single layer that goes into it. Like I've seen this with, this is the way I learn in general. And I've been working for 8 years. I can't believe I've been working for 8 years. I feel so old.
Thank you for that gift.
But since like owning a lot of ASP.NET, one of the things that I realized was I didn't care for open APIs. I didn't understand why we had to support this way that you tested your APIs. But when I reached a point that I was building an API that was just too hard to look at in like plain JSON and knowing when to use open APIs.
Right. You outgrew it.
I outgrew it, right? And then I was able to go to my engineering team and say, open APIs in the next version of this is a must because we need it for developer productivity. And it was a growth in myself. to
Mm.
realize even when to turn on features, but I needed to gain an appreciation for it. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
yeah. It does make sense because I all love my analogies,
Yeah.
and the analogy that I've decided on for this podcast right now is the one about cars and gears. You were like, I've got 2 gears, I don't need third gear in this car, and then one day you're like, well, I need to go faster, and you shift it into third gear, and you go back to the designer, and you go, we need more gears on this car. That is growth, that is engineering growth, and that's the kind of growth we want people to have. So when we tried for the first time ever teaching C# over a 3-day period with .NET notebooks and the coding pack, on the third day, Sharita and I took it into third gear, and we got out of notebooks after having spent 2 solid days never making an app. Then we okay, now we're going to make a console app. Now we're going to make a WinForms app. And they didn't seem as stressed out about the bits around. And we broke those things down because they had spent 2 days thinking about the language, and then the structure around it didn't matter so much. So it was a gentle on-ramp for them, and it worked really well.
And this was what, to students?
So we did a thing through the Microsoft Reactor. We tried to focus on students. We're going to do a back to school special in a couple of months and try to do this as well. We have a .NET, a C# 101 notebook now. If you go to .NET/learn to code, if you have .NET Interactive already, you can just go there, click on it. It will jump directly out of the browser and into Visual Studio Code. You don't even have to download the file and hunt for it later, which was another thing we wanted to avoid. We don't want people to download the file and lose it.
Okay. So, you use the latest bits then of Open with notebooks.
So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have Open directly into notebooks, but it happens from the browser. So the browser doesn't go http:// it goes VS Code //. And then right now we've just got a great new intern, Sophia from University of Washington. She's going to be going through all of our .NET videos that you helped with and make notebooks for each one.
Ooh.
So you can follow along to the videos in a notebook.
Our interns should collaborate because I have interns who are improving .NET Interactive.
Do you have
notebooks.
an intern too?
I have 3.
You have 3 interns? I only got 1. That's no fair. Give me an intern.
I'm a bonus.
Let's. I love that we're having a work meeting on this podcast right now, which is great. So yeah, chat with Myra on the team, and let's make sure our interns collaborate because they may be doing the same work twice, and then they could team up. That's so fun. See, this is the kind of cool stuff that we get to work on, with the goal being to make it easier for students to learn this stuff.
Yeah, and this is something I was talking to Scott Hunter about, is that our goal, and you and I
our
have
shared
been
boss, by the way.
Our share, the top boss.
Our boss.
Our goal, you and I, has always been to make .NET approachable. Mm-hmm. You have always been the wonderful, friendly, joyful person out there in the community, bringing feedback.
You don't work for me anymore.
I don't know. That's the reason why I'm saying it, because now I can say it and it's honest.
That's very kind.
But bringing back this feedback into our teams, right? On how we can build it. And in my new role, I've taken everything that we did together and I'm demanding that we make these changes. So we do make .NET approachable. Yeah. And we do make .NET a nice place for everybody to learn how to code. Because there's a lack of forgiveness when you're building .NET code. And this is, I think, with every compiled language, right?
Yeah, anything strongly typed is unforgiving by nature.
Everything that's strongly typed is just going to, but everything else, like Python and JavaScript, they're more forgiving. And how do we have more of a forgiving experience when people are learning how to write code?
It's interesting that you bring that up, because one of the things that Sharita and I were commenting on when we were teaching this week was these error messages are very specific, but also really scary. They're telling you exactly what they want, but they're using, cannot implicitly cast this to that. And it's just you could just tell me what to do too, You give me a scary code, and then you give me a call stack that I don't even really need the call stack right now. So while we're off doing simple APIs and simple programs, there's also something to be said for simple error messages.
Do you know I actually have that as a list item for minimal APIs? Is meaningful.
That's a better way to put it.
Error messages, because you'll get an error message. It will be NU 1003 MS build explicit casting failed on this file. And she's like, I didn't even know there was a file that existed like that on my
Yeah.
machine.
Oh, and then it's some generated thing or
Yeah.
some async stack that is ridiculous. No, but let me ask you this though: what do you say to the, let's call them the haters or the folks that maybe disagree, that are like, well, do we really need people who don't know how the system works coming in? And I don't know, I don't know what they're going to do: mess up our stuff, move our cheese. I have no problem with new early in career engineers coming in because they will eventually learn all the bits.
Wow.
What do you say to the haters?
To the haters, don't worry because okay. I was having this conversation with someone. Whenever you talk about making things more accessible to people, people freak out for no reason whatsoever. So, just as you think about the more junior engineers coming in and learning over time, you
Mm-hmm.
also want other people from different backgrounds to come in and learn over time. They might never be interested in messing with the system.
Yeah.
So, don't worry, you're fine. But also, just be more open to sharing. I think that's like a big thing. It's like, as kids, we were taught to share.net with new people, share these ecosystems with people coming to learn for the first time. Be welcoming. Like Glenn and I were talking to someone. Her name is Ilan, and she is a administrator at a school, at a public school in Oakland. And she taught herself C# and .NET during COVID, all on her own.
Cool.
But
I like her already.
I love her. You should have her on the show. But what really made my heart sing was when she tweeted out to people that I need a .NET mentor, and one of our MVPs, I believe, in Australia, is now her mentor.
See, that's what I've been trying to do for the last 20 years. And you're pulling it off right now. You're introducing new people to this thing that we like, this language that we like, and we have a welcoming community ready to help them. Like, yeah, there's pockets of mean people or whatever, but like being able to write a program is power, and we want to share that power with people.
Yeah. And I feel that power every single time I learn something new, even within .NET, or if I try a new library, like Spectre Console. Mm-hmm. You've seen it.
Oh, so good.
So good. But when I was able to build my first Spectre Console application, and it took me like 45 minutes or so, do you know how good that felt? It felt amazing.
Yeah.
And you want that feeling for literally everyone, because we all have those feelings when we work on something. Or like I draw a lot. I always feel that that energy, that joy when I've completed a painting. And with code, it allows everyone to feel that joy when you create something that's beautiful. It doesn't even need to function. It doesn't even need to do anything of value. It just needs to make you feel good.
I like watching the new early in career coders on TikTok tweeting about like how they feel, or not tweeting, TikToking rather, about how they feel about stuff. So like somebody like got something to compile and they're like, their arms went straight up in the air, and then they like looked around. There was no one there to cheer them on. But that's what you do when you get it to work. Oh, I did it. Oh, I did it. And then it's like, oh, well, it felt good though. Yay.
That's what it feels like, right? Even if nobody's watching, it's like dancing like nobody's watching. I was getting the .NET templates to compile to build locally. And this was the first time I had ever done it. And when I did it, I was just like, look at me. I have a PhD in .NET building template stuff.
Yeah. I got a private build of NuGet and then a private build of the CLR, which is not this kind of stuff regular folks are going to do. But when you want to change it, you do. And you're like, yeah, look at that. I got my own build. I got Scott.net. I'm going to change all the namespaces and re-release it as my own thing.
It feels great, right? Like just because you can.
Yeah.
But how do we make sure that when people come to any language, right, any programming language, is that they feel that they could do that one day? And I think we kind of see that in Python, but I think Python has made specific people in the Python community. And I can't say it's a whole language itself, but like people like Carol Wheeling is like such a great example where she's created this space where you feel empowered by your first application that allows you to go build your next application that allows you to go build your next application. And before you know it, you're contributing to the Jupyter open source project.
Right. What you're talking about is building on success.
Yep.
And that's what I like, the idea of starting to learn .NET and C# and also F# and other languages, because it's a polyglot experience in .NET notebooks, building on that success, maybe building a Windows Forms app or a console app, then making a website, and then registering your domain, and then you're off to the races and you can make anything. Which actually brings me to another point that you're passionate about as we get towards the end of our talk here is polyglot notebooks, which is something that you feel really strongly about. Like there's Jupyter notebooks, but the idea that you could have JavaScript, C#, F#, HTML, like whatever, like everything you want in different cells in one notebook, that's possible today?
That's possible today. So .NET Interactive has been around. So .NET Interactive for everyone is the .NET notebook, but .NET Interactive is a project. So if you want to check it up, go to github.com/.net/interactive, and that's us. And the reason why we wanted to have an interactive, a polyglot experience is we live in a polyglot world, right? When you're coding. And everyone uses the best language for the language at task, right? So if you want to display data, you're going to use JavaScript, right? For all your data visualization. Sure. You're going to use HTML for all your rendering. You're going to use C# for your data cleaning. You can use PowerShell for grabbing and fetching your data. And we wanted to enable people to do that. And this is not only great for learning, because it gives our educators one tool to do it all, right? So you have a .NET notebook and you can switch from teaching Python to JavaScript to HTML to C# without having to change and configure out your environment. And I think that's huge, right? We need to make educators successful to do what they're meant to do, educate, and not become IT professionals. And like that's like a big thing for us for .NET Interactive. Another thing is just for our industry, right? We're all plugging into these notebooks, and you have places like Databricks and Notable that are all looking at what polyglot notebooks solve for people. And you can also call them multi-language notebooks. It sounds less scary as well.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a great point. I was using a term that's complicated, sounding like implicit casting or whatever. But yeah, and that's something that we're seeing now as for the last year or two, we've been slowly but surely going through the C# documentation on Docs, on Microsoft Docs. And you'll find as you're just wandering around learning C# that you can actually run the sample code in the browser without downloading anything. So like when you bump into a sample, you want to be able to run it. That was like the beginning of this all was try.net with some JavaScript that would do that. Now .NET Interactive, the engine, .NET Notebooks, and then of course the coding pack that folks can get. We'll put the links in the show notes at .NET/learn-to-code. Cool. Well, this has been good fun, hasn't it?
It's been fun. Thanks for having me. I've been wanting to come on the show for a minute, so I'm really excited to be here.
I'm glad you did. Cool. We've been chatting with Maria Naggaga all about thinking about new ways to learn how to be a programmer today on Cancel Minutes. And we'll see you again next week.